This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, shall we begin? You can see the screen. Okay. We have missed out on this one drug from loop diuretics, and the drug is ethacrenic acid. You can take down the structure of ethacrenic acid. Take down the structure of ethacrenic acid. Let me know once you're done. Okay. After you have taken down the structure of ethacrenic acid, we need to number the benzene ring, the main ring of the drug. Okay. So this oxygen to which carbon it is attached, this part, this carbon is number 1. Okay. The first, this chloride, this is number 2. This is 3. This is 4, 5, and 6. I repeat, start numbering from here. The carbon which is attached to oxygen. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. So after you have taken down the structure of ethacrenic acid, you also need to number the carbons. So this is carbon number 1. This chloride attached to carbon number 2. This is carbon number 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. So this is a loop diuretic. It also acts like furosemide and bumetanide. It also acts on the loop of Henle, or the ascending loop of Henle. And basically it is a non-mercurial compound of phenoxyacetic acid, and it is having a diuretic activity. Okay. So once you have taken down the structure, we'll write the SAR for ethacrenic acid. Number 1, the presence of oxyacetic acid. The presence of oxyacetic acid moiety at first position. The presence of oxyacetic acid moiety at the first position of the benzene ring is essential for activity. Okay. Then next is now, if this is the oxyacetic acid moiety, which is at carbon number 1, this is the ortho position from this. This is the ortho, meta, and this is the para position. So from the oxyacetic acid, the para position, at this position you have the sulfahydryl reactive acrolyl moiety. Okay. So take down the acrolyl moiety. The acrolyl moiety is located at para position, of oxyacetic acid group. of oxyacetic acid group. Next point, activating groups like chloride. Activating groups like chloride occupy activating groups like chloride occupy either second, third, or both the positions. I am locking the class. If you leave, I will not permit you again inside. Don't keep moving in and out of the class now. I'm locking the meeting. I repeat, activating groups like chloride occupy either the second, third, or both the positions. Next point, alkyl chain of 2 to 4 carbon atom, alkyl chain of 2 to 4 carbon atoms occupies alpha position, occupies alpha position to the carbonyl, to the carbonyl on the acrolyl moiety. Alkyl chain of 2 or 4 carbon atoms occupies alpha position to the carbonyl on the acrolyl moiety. Next point. The hydrogen occupies terminal position. The hydrogen occupies terminal position of the carbon-carbon double bond of the carbon-carbon double bond in the acrolyl moiety we are talking about these hydrogen atoms. Okay, this is the carbon-carbon double bond. Now this carbon-carbon double bond is very essential for diuretic activity. The it is susceptible to nucleophilic attack. The nucleophilic attack will take place over here, and through this the drug will be imparting its diuretic action. So last point, this double bond or this carbon-carbon double bond in the acrolyl moiety, this carbon-carbon double bond in the acrolyl moiety is susceptible to nucleophilic attack, is susceptible to nucleophilic attack and is very imperative for diuretic action. Okay. Now from here we move on to the next class, and the next class is the potassium sparing diuretics. So in the last class we saw that all the drugs which are acting on site number 1, 2 and 3, all of them are having one issue or one side effect, or the fear that because we are consuming these drugs which are acting on site 1, 2 and 3, there will be a overload of sodium reabsorption at site 4, or that is the collecting tubule. And if this happens, that is if the load of site 1 or 2 or 3 or all three combined falls on the collecting tubule site, that is at site 4, there will be there is a fear that there will be loss of potassium ions. Do you remember last class we discussed this? Okay, and I told you that it is usually seen that the drug is supplemented with another diuretic, a milder diuretic, and that is called as the potassium sparing diuretic drug. And what this drug will do is it will not allow the body to go into hypokalemia. Now the presence of potassium ions in the body to have electrical interactions or to have hormonal interactions between cells is very important. The levels of the levels of potassium have to be maintained. Okay, and if these levels are not maintained, then you are going to have a miscommunication that is going to happen between the cells. So this is going to be called as hypokalemia. So if you don't want your body, while getting treated with a diuretic, you don't want your body to suffer from hypokalemia, then you have to supplement your major diuretic, which is either acting on site 1, 2 or 3, that is a thiazide or thiazide like diuretic, a carbonic anhydrase inhibitor, or it may be the loop of Henle acting agents, or that is the high ceiling diuretics. You will need to supplement it with these potassium sparing diuretics. Now, these potassium sparing diuretics, what will they do? They will save the body from becoming hypokalemic, or they will not allow the situation of hypokalemia to form. Now, these potassium sparing diuretics, these are some of the examples. One is spironolactone and the other is triamcitrine. Okay, so these are the two examples of potassium sparing diuretics, spironolactone and triamcitrine. Or there is one more example, and that example is amiloride. All of them can act as potassium sparing diuretics. Okay, so this is the last class of your diuretic agents. Take down. Potassium sparing diuretics. Naveen, don't keep moving in and out of the meeting. I'm not going to allow you again. Potassium sparing diuretics. All the previously studied diuretic agents, all the previously studied diuretic agents have a major drawback. That they all increase renal excretion of potassium. That they all increase the renal excretion of potassium, which can lead to hypokalemia. HYPOKALEMIA, which can lead to hypokalemia. Next line. Therefore, the need for potassium sparing diuretics the need for potassium sparing diuretics, which increase sodium and chloride excretion. You can use symbols Na plus Cl minus, which can increase sodium and chloride excretion without causing urinary excretion of potassium, was felt. You can take down the first example, spironolactone. Okay, now if you see the structure of this spironolactone, you see a typical steroidal structure where you have three 6-membered cyclic rings fused to each other, and one ring is a 5-membered ring which is fused to the one of the three 6-membered rings. So this is a very typical structure of spironolactones. Now you can go back to the place where we studied the different ways in which sodium reabsorption happens. Okay, and in the case of collecting tubule, we saw that this part of the collecting tubule has two different types of cells. That is the intercalated cells and the principal cells. I hope you can recollect. You can go back, turn back to your notes, and you can see that we wrote about two types of cells being present over here, the principal cells and the intercalated cells. Now, these principal cells which are present at the collecting tubule, they secrete aldosterone. Okay, it is a steroid which is produced naturally in our body. So they secrete aldosterone, and this aldosterone improvises, or it encourages the sodium potassium ATPase pump to give that H plus ion. Okay, so if you recollect, when the sodium reabsorption has to happen from the collecting tubule over here, there has to be action of principal cells as well as intercalated cells. The principal cells which are present in this collecting tubule, they secrete what is called as a steroid, that is aldosterone, and aldosterone in turn affects the sodium potassium ATPase pump to produce H plus ions. Now, when the actual reabsorption of sodium takes place from the luminal fluid, this hydrogen is getting exchanged. I hope you remember this, okay? That every time a sodium comes in, a hydrogen goes out. This happens at the proximal convoluted tubule also. In proximal convoluted tubule, the carbonic anhydrase enzyme is responsible for production of H plus ion. And in the collecting tubule, that is at side 4, the aldosterone secretion is responsible for the production of H plus ion from the sodium potassium ATPase pump. Okay, so when this sodium potassium ATPase pump is able to produce the H plus ion, only then the sodium reabsorption can actually happen and the H plus ion can be thrown out into the luminal fluid. This is how the sodium reabsorption happens. This is the normal process. Now, what do we want? We don't want this sodium reabsorption to happen at this site 4. Okay. So, if you don't want this sodium reabsorption to happen at site 4, you have to stop the production of H plus ion. If you want to stop the production of H plus ion, you have to stop the action of aldosterone. Okay. So the drug which we have noted down just now, that is spironolactone, will inhibit competitively aldosterone, and it will decrease the production of H plus ions from the principal cells, because of which there will be no H plus ion available. If there is no H plus ion, if I am not able to give you H plus ion, I cannot reabsorb the sodium ion from you. Okay, so I will not have H plus ion to give you, so I will not reabsorb sodium ion. And when I will not reabsorb sodium ion, I will automatically have diuretic action. Okay, I am repeating the entire mechanism of action once again. Listen carefully. Okay, this collecting tubule, the site 4 of the nephron, has two types of cells: the principal cells and the intercalated cells. The principal cells have aldosterone being produced in them. And what is the function of this aldosterone? The function of this aldosterone is to stimulate the sodium potassium ATPase pump. When the sodium potassium ATPase pump is stimulated, H plus ion will be secreted. This is the normal process I am talking about. When this H plus ion is secreted, we can reabsorb sodium from the luminal fluid, and we can give away this H plus ion. Now, this give and take policy has to be there. There has to be H to move to the luminal fluid if you want to reabsorb sodium. Now, what spironolactone drug does? The spironolactone drug will not allow the aldosterone to be binding with the sodium potassium ATPase pump. It will not allow the H plus ion being generated. And when this H plus ion is not generated, automatically the sodium potassium ATPase pump, the sodium reabsorption from the sodium potassium ATPase pump will be inhibited, because of which you will have diuretic action. Okay, so this is the entire mechanism of action of spironolactone. If there is anybody who has not understood, you can put it in the chat box. I'll try to explain it again. Otherwise, we will continue. Okay, I am assuming that you all have understood. Okay, so take down. Aldosterone enters the principal cells. Aldosterone enters the principal cells of the late distal tubule, where it combines with the cytosolic receptor, where it combines with the cytosolic receptor, where it combines with the cytosolic receptor, and turns on the synthesis of H plus ions, and turns on the synthesis of H plus ions by the sodium potassium ATPase pump. This H plus ion enters the luminal fluid, or luminal fluid, and in return sodium ion is reabsorbed. Leave a line. Next line, right? Spironolactone is a diuretic which competitively inhibits the actions of aldosterone, which competitively inhibits the action of aldosterone. It does not allow the H plus ion to be formed. It does not allow the H plus ion to be formed. And it enhances sodium and chloride excretion. And it enhances sodium and chloride excretion. Next line, put a star in the margin. For spironolactone to exert its diuretic action, for spironolactone to exert its diuretic action, presence of active aldosterone is important. Presence of active aldosterone is important, because if this aldosterone is not there, then H plus ion will not be forming, and then that exchange of sodium and H plus ion is not going to happen. Then you will not have the proper diuretic action if you are using this spironolactone when the aldosterone is absent. Okay, so this aldosterone theory should be happening in practical, which means that it should be actively releasing H plus ions from the sodium potassium ATPase pump, so that the sodium reabsorption can happen in normal circumstances. Only then can you use spironolactone as the potassium sparing diuretic. Okay, now the next drug of this class of potassium sparing diuretics is triametrine. You can take down the structure. You can also take down the structure of amiloride. This is also a potassium sparing diuretic, amiloride. Take down. Both triametrine and amiloride plug the sodium channels in the luminal membrane. Plug the sodium channels in the luminal membrane of the principal cells. Plug the sodium channels in the luminal membrane of the principal cells at site 4. Thus inhibiting the entry of 2 to 3% of sodium 2 to 3% of sodium in the cells. Leave a line. They decrease the concentration of sodium in the principal cells and decrease the activity of sodium potassium ATPase pump and decrease the activity of sodium potassium ATPase pump, thereby decreasing secretion of potassium ions, thereby decreasing the secretion of potassium ions. Leave a line, next line. Both the drugs can function without the presence of aldosterone. Without the presence of aldosterone. Okay, so these are the two drugs, trimetrin and amiloride. Take down the structure of both. Trimetrin. The last drug of this class is an osmotic diuretic and its name is mannitol. So finish this quickly, then we'll finish with mannitol and we are done with diuretic agents. Are you done with trimetrin? Okay. This is amiloride. Anybody wants to take down the structure of amiloride? We can wait for a minute. Okay. Shall we move on to mannitol? Yes. Okay. So the last drug of this class of diuretics is mannitol, and the class is it is called as an osmotic diuretic. And if you remember your basics about osmosis, okay, if you remember the basics of osmosis, then the solute always moves from a higher concentration to a lower concentration. Am I right? What is osmosis? Can somebody unmute and tell me? Yes, anybody? Osmosis? Nobody knows what is osmosis? You want me to take names and then tell what is osmosis? Somebody has to tell me osmosis just now. Yes? Somebody unmute yourself. Otherwise, I will start unmuting you now.
And movement of solute particles from higher to lower concentration.
Yes. Movement of solute particles from a higher concentration to lower concentration. Now, this theory exactly is used in the case of mannitol, where mannitol is going to go and settle into um, into the site 4, and when it settles into the site 4, it builds up an osmotic pressure such that it will inhibit the reabsorption of sodium. Now sodium can freely move from the luminal fluid into inside, or it can be easily reabsorbed from the luminal fluid because the concentration of sodium in the luminal fluid is more than the concentration of sodium in the antiluminal region. Now, when you take mannitol as a diuretic agent, the osmotic pressure or the osmosis concentrate or the osmotic concentration in the antiluminal area is built up. Okay, and because the concentration of the solute in the antiluminal area is more, okay, there will be no reabsorption of sodium from the luminal fluid into the antiluminal fluid. This will stop the entry of sodium will stop. In fact, the reverse will happen. Mannitol will actually, after you have taken mannitol, that will actually move out into the luminal fluid through the glomerular filtration, and that will get excreted out, thereby preventing the reabsorption of sodium and chloride at the site 4. Okay, so take down the structure of mannitol. Take down. Osmotic diuretics act by increasing osmotic diuretics act by increasing the osmotic pressure of tubular fluid. Osmotic pressure of tubular fluid. Next, osmotic diuretics are freely filterable. Osmotic diuretics are freely filterable at the glomerulus. When these agents are administered, they enter the luminal fluid. They enter the luminal fluid through glomerular filtration. They enter the luminal fluid through glomerular filtration. And the presence of these presence of these osmotic diuretics is in very high concentration. in the luminal fluid. Due to which reabsorption of sodium and chloride ions is prevented. Uses: mannitol is used as a diagnostic agent. Mannitol is used as a diagnostic agent in kidney functions. It is used in the treatment of acute renal failure. It is used in the treatment of acute renal failure. And cerebral edema. And cerebral edema. Okay, so with this we finish the topic of diuretics. We have covered all the drugs under diuretics. Whatever drugs we have missed out, you are supposed to find the structure of it, but I have given you a basic SAR and mechanism of action introduction to all the classes of diuretic agents. Okay, so Monday we can have a session where we can discuss any difficulties if you have. Okay, so I have asked your CR. Is she here? Prithvi, are you here? Are you there? Is Prithvi here? Okay, I have asked your CR to get your email IDs. Okay, so whatever email IDs I will get, I will mail you the assignment. Prithvi, I cannot hear you. You can unmute and talk, Prithvi. Oh, okay. Okay, so she has not given me all the email IDs still. We'll close this screen sharing it.